Okay, I just done that last thing. I think, did Tom White say last time that his data is being used by John Hopkins, or was that someone else? I mean, his compiled data of the UK from
Yes.
4 nations. Anyway, let me share my screen. If I can find the right one. Yeah. Okay, so we started making a dashboard back in March, and we started trying to use PHE data, but it was only covering England. So we switched to Tom White's data because whenever you start doing UK type things, people from Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland quite rightly say, why is it only including England? So we used Tom White's compile data. He stopped compiling that, as he mentioned, at the last Open Data Saves Lives at the end of August. So we deprecated this dashboard. Hopefully you can see this. We've still been generating hex maps. They don't always include the whole of the UK. Sometimes it's England, sometimes England and Wales, sometimes it's combinations of nations. It has confirmed cases per capita, latest cases. We've got a 7-day average. I'll come back to that a bit later. 7-day average per capita, because that changes the story a little bit. We've got, hopefully you can see the fraction of key workers. Also, if you hover over it, it gives you the details for each local authority. So I should say these are hex maps, local authority based hexes. So every local authority is given the same area in the visualization. I haven't seen the thing that you mentioned, Paul, about the government using Hexmap. Anyway, it's also got all deaths per capita using ONS data, and then what number of them are COVID deaths, and then the fraction of COVID deaths compared to all deaths. So each of these hex maps tells a slightly different story, and I think you need to look at the notes underneath to work out what's going on, but also use some sense of what you know about the country to work out what the stories are. For instance, like the deaths, the coasts clearly have slightly higher rates of deaths, and I'm assuming that's because people who are retired tend to move to coastal areas, and you'd expect more deaths, and that's why the coast doesn't show up in the COVID deaths in quite the same way as it does in just all deaths. We also have some data which I'm going to update to the August figures, and then hopefully the September figures, which is the self-employment income support scheme and value of claims and average value of claims and the total number of claims. And then we've got employment's furloughed and things like that. We've also got some 360 giving data, because David Kane at 360 Giving was very good at producing local authority splits of data. So I can show where the grants that are known to 360 Giving that are published in a 360 Giving format, where they're being awarded to. So that doesn't necessarily tell you where grants are being spent or where all grants are being awarded, but it tells you where the ones that are published in the open standard are being received. Okay, so we did that. This is the Public Health England and NHSX dashboard that probably most people know about, coronavirus.data.gov.uk. It also has the data published there. Now, I sort of prefer CSV files for quite a lot of reasons. One, they're quite usable in lots of tools and they're very easy to consume. Also, it means as long as you've got a local copy of that CSV file, you can make stuff with it and you're not reliant on other bits of infrastructure falling over. But Paul asked me to, I can't actually get to the right tab because the Zoom stuff is in the way, so let me see if we can get to it. There is an API for using it, and we decided to try to use the API from Public Health England for a West Yorkshire specific dashboard. So this is very specific to the 5 local authorities in West Yorkshire. We just put them in alphabetical order there. They're not in order of anything else. And the colours are just purely colours from each of the council's websites that they choose to use to give you your eye a chance to realise that they're in columns. So we're using the Public Health England API and making requests, which is why this dashboard doesn't always work, because sometimes the API seems to slightly fall over or not respond. So we don't always get data in the page. But when it's working, like there, you can, this is a few minutes ago, you can see their latest data. So we're showing the total cases by local authority. It's basically making 5 requests, 1 for each local authority. It gives you the dates when that data was true, because you can't rely on it always being today or even necessarily yesterday. Just in the last 6 months or so, sometimes some local authorities have missed days of data, and so I'm making sure to put the date so that you know when it refers to. I'm calculating weekly cases, and Paul, I think, has had a discussion with Bradford Council because they have a dashboard as well. They're calculating weekly cases in a different way. I, perhaps naively, but I think most people assume that weekly cases is a 7-day total. Obviously, that's every day in the 7 days isn't doesn't have the same number of cases because weekends we know have fewer. So I think Bradford are omitting weekends, but they're still having 7 days, which I presume that's to get rid of a weekend effect. But presumably then can have a, depending which day you look at it, could have a double Monday effect. I thought I'd go with the most obvious thing, which is the 7 days up to the date that's shown there, because that's what I would naively expect as a member of the public weekly cases to mean. And then we've got the change on the previous week using the previous 7 days to that. Then we've got the total cases per 100,000, weekly cases per 100,000, using the population figures from the top there. And weekly COVID deaths, total COVID deaths, that's using the ONS data. Actually, yeah, so there's 2 data sources here. Some of it is coming from my processing of the ONS weekly data, which is what these deaths by week at the bottom here. And then we've got the COVID deaths as a % of total deaths. So I'm not sure necessarily if every figure on there is useful, but we've had some feedback from people in West Yorkshire saying that it was helpful for them to see things changing. Yeah, that's probably a very quick summary of that, Paul.